Dennis, welcome to the podcast. Super happy to have you on and talk about Cyber Crucible. Um, just welcome on. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. It's always great to be able to speak about, where we came from and why we do what we do.
Mhm.
I feel like so many people get trapped into talking about the what and the why and the how, right? And then
Okay.
from like their product standpoint, right? And they don't really talk about what keeps them up at night and what makes them drop a safe kind of journey in their company to something that, to start something new from scratch.
hmm And what does keep you up at night?
It's really in my industry in cybersecurity, one of the biggest challenges right now is that we have a human capital based, industry,
hmm
and it takes a whole lot of skills and expertise to actually get to the point where you can even be what's considered a junior employee.
hmm
And Really what it is I'm thinking, okay, well, yes, I did this manually, or I stumbled into a hacker 10 years ago, and there, is the automation in place such that I can rely on what we've built to automatically take care of a problem?
hmm
And that's really what keeps me up because we on purpose don't have a bench. We
Okay.
don't have like we're not trying to do the impossible, which is, staff enough to keep the hackers out automatically, and it's too slow anyway.
Mm.
And so for me, it's always like, what did we miss? We're always looking over our shoulders, trying to, even though we're surpassing our competitors in many ways,
Mm.
but it's always like, okay, well, all it takes is us to forget about something, and then, the hackers kind of come in.
Yeah, for sure. And you said you feel like you're surpassing your competitors in some ways. What ways do you think like Cyber Crucible does it differently, or how do you think you differentiate?
Yeah, the security industry, and I'm a little bit older than you, I think, right? Based on
Yeah.
you have no gray hair and I have a lot of gray hair, but
Yeah.
but back when the EDR and XDR industry started to come around, it was a little bit of a hard sale. It was
hmm
necessary at the time, but it was a world in which we said, look, we can't just find that hash and keep the hackers out. So we have to rely on turning cybersecurity into a little bit of like a law enforcement or intelligence agency where you're just collecting a whole bunch, like a dossier on the
hmm
company, and
Yep.
then associating the dossiers between the companies and trying to find the bad guy, which really is no different than a lot of what law enforcement does, mapping out. We always see those shows with like the photographs on the whiteboard and trying to track like the mob or whatever, like it's a little bit like that, right?
Yeah.
And that works really well as long as, well, okay, we'll continue with the mafia kind of analogy where, if the mafia members change every hour or every day, then your nice whiteboard and tracking and all your analysis with your dossiers doesn't really work, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have more of a like a sci-fi reference to like Minority Report, where you're able to assess the behaviors beforehand, right? So
hmm
as long as the hackers stayed stable,
hmm
EDR, XDR worked.
Yeah.
Those days were good when they were good. I mean, there's some fantastic discoveries. Like I mean, even Stuxnet was discovered through those techniques and other very advanced tools.
hmm
Um, but that also relied on the hackers, whether they were nation states or not, to be able to be pretty stable for us. And we in 2019, I realized that we were getting to a point where ransomware was becoming economic necessity for hackers because they were getting so good at just like mutating and changing around the EDRs that the
hmm
dossiers could never quite keep up with what the hackers are really doing. And so I realized we had to build an automated system that was
Yep.
able to address all the mutations all the time so that no
hmm
matter who happened to be on that whiteboard, like whatever photograph was there, it didn't matter. Like
Yeah.
we were able to assess the behaviors.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. I think that's in speaking with like probably over 100, 150 like cyber firms, probably a good half of them are moving towards more of that automated side of things. Like I was just today speaking to a SaaS where they're trying to like cut out the human component of it, a lot of it, and try and still be accurate. And so there's obviously challenges and like a lot of the false positives do come from AI, so you have to sort of balance that. I'm curious, like over the past 25 years, you've been in the space. Like, what threats do you think a lot of organizations are still underestimating?
You know, um, whether it is ransomware or data theft or like identity theft, the with the automation that the hackers are using, so they're using AI to essentially become initial access brokers, which is a professional way of saying, I don't know, the people that that are getting paid to get access to victims, right?
Mhm.
And then that follows up with who buys that, the extortionists, basically, right?
Yep.
And the extortionists are using more of like a robotic process automation standpoint.
Hmm.
The non-technical way of saying that is like, well, if you have a junior salesperson or a marketer, they're
Hmm.
producing call scripts and how to handle objections and giving like this tree of behaviors and Q&A to do.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of what the extortionists are doing now. So really with the automation they're using, any of these automation capabilities on the defensive side really are never going to be able to keep up. The AI that I'm seeing, it's good, but it's measuring the wrong data, quite honestly. All that AI, like having done that, I mean, I've been through NSA doing new stuff and big discoveries and everything.
Hmm.
But of course, I always joke the first thing that everyone did was General said was take my name off the slide, But like
Yeah.
all this like Chat GPT powered, LLM powered, or other AI used by these companies is essentially is trying to find the patterns between the attacks in a better way because they just have too much data.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a war, an imbalanced war. It's irregular warfare where the hackers have already automated how to make those patterns disappear, uh,
Yeah.
while the defenders are trying to find a better way to do that. It just reminds me of back in the Cold War. Again, I know I'm a little bit older, but like
Yep.
but back in the Cold War, they were trying to protect against electromagnetic pulse blasts from like nukes and things like that. And the problem was that if you talk to anyone, like I guess it would be my parents, but it would take basically $1,000 to increase the size of the EMP blast, and it would take $1 million to protect against that blast. It was completely imbalanced, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of where all these companies are going. And so for us, we had to say, okay, well, no matter what we do in correlation, we don't have the right data. So we had
Yep.
to actually invent new data sensors to approach the problem orthogonally to say, okay, now we have the right data. We do use AI, but we don't use LLMs. That's a misapplication
Okay.
of that technology. And we go ahead and we develop the behavior model to make autonomously on the edge to make our decision and respond
Hmm.
without involving a human because that's just way too slow.
For sure. And no, speed is key in that. And how do you actually go about one of the common things I hear again is the difficulty in like educating people, whether that be the CISOs, IT managers of big companies. They think they're doing all their IT things, which they probably are good at. Forget
Yeah.
about the cyber or maybe the development teams. It's like they're moving so rapidly. Like we could use security, but that's going to delay us by 2 weeks. How do you go about educating people on the necessity for things like Cyber Crucible and the likes, without maybe like being too pushy?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes more of a professorial kind of context
Mm-hmm.
in that you're educating about the underlying technologies and leading them towards the right questions. Even the question like, why are you buying an EDR XDR?
Mm-hmm.
Let's break it down into use cases. Like, why'd you spend the money?
Yeah.
And of course, if the answer is my boss told me to, then I'm like, okay, well, this is gonna be a little bit harder than I thought. But if they break it down to, the different use cases or feature sets, that really helps us, position the customer nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes a little bit of education around, horizontal versus vertical AI
Okay.
can be helpful. It's funny, I just actually got sent an ad, and there was one EDR company that said they were the first like AI company, and like they're like 20 years old, and I was just like, that's not, the marketers can say anything, like
Yeah.
so. But it's a little bit of education with customers, and they seem to respect that. It's a lot of analogies, a lot of non-cyber analogies.
Yep.
We're very good at using plain speak,
Mm-hmm.
and we're very good at being able to demonstrate because when comes down to it, we have a variety of bake-off demo videos.
Okay.
Each one's about a minute, and we say what vendor do you use? And most of them we actually just already have we've already captured a defeat being used by a hacker in one of our clients,
Hmm.
and we just go ahead and say, okay, oh, you use, I'm not gonna name and
Yeah.
shame brands, but like,
Yeah.
oh, you use this, great. Okay, let's bring up this 60-second video showing you exactly how it's defeated by the hacker. We captured this at this date, and here
Hmm.
you go. Watch it being shut off,
Yeah.
and that normally causes them pause because, despite the NASCAR sponsorships and all of the like, marketing being spent, when you're showing the tool getting defeated, it's kind of like, paint companies are great, and then we're like, let's just go ahead and paint on the wall and see what happens, and then suddenly it's peeling and bubbling off, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that didn't line up with the marketing, did it? So that's a good tool we use.
Okay. Very interesting. Yes, there is, and I think a lot of the smaller cybersecurity companies don't utilize it enough. The positioning of like, okay, these big guys, yeah, they have the brand, but at some point they don't care about you. Like you're just another number. Versus when it's, maybe someone like Cyber Crucible, it's like, okay, we don't have thousands and thousands of clients. Like we can, we'll be there. Like you could probably call Dennis, like if you really need, and Dennis would be on, responding to your incident, whatever. Um, like in that case, how do you handle organizations who think like their current vendor is enough? Like aside from what you mentioned, even like there's still
Mhm.
like a lot of resistance because people have to change all these things. Like how do you overcome when they think their current tools is enough?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is showing that their current tool, we just show an example of it getting
Yep.
beaten, right? And then we show it with Cyber Crucible installed and how, and we're kind of like, well, look, guys, we wouldn't have even been able to capture this if we weren't resilient to the hackers trying to shut us off.
Hmm.
The next step is that we've done a lot of work, apart from the resiliency against hackers kind of, trying to turn us off. We've done a lot of work in removing barriers of entry and
Okay.
barriers of operation where they're able to use our product. We lean into proof of concepts.
Hmm.
We love POCs. They're like,
Hmm.
oh, can we do a POC? I'm like, great, let's do 2 weeks. Great, you'll see it, and it'll work.
Yeah.
So that works well. That's something that security tools have a lot of problems with. They
Hmm.
have 9,000 knobs to turn, and normally and part of that I know is just a strategy to basically, create like a victim blame kind of ecosystem where it's like, oh, we didn't turn this one knob correctly, therefore, sorry
Hmm.
for you, and that's not how we like to do things.
Okay.
So we do that, and then, with the POC, what we're also doing is we're demonstrating how the onboarding is about 5 to 10 minutes, and
Okay.
then the rest is just configuration. And
Yep.
so we have two clients right now actually I can speak to. One is a manufacturing firm.
Hmm.
They installed about 2,000 agents. They were in a rush because they were fighting back some hackers that were trying to get in.
Yep.
And we just had user training last week. It turns out that the whole time it had been protecting the customers, and they hadn't yet bothered. I say bothered. They hadn't yet had time to even get user accounts. So the whole
Hmm.
time it was blocking hackers. We brought up the telemetry and showed them on the training. They didn't even have accounts to the system. They had no indication at all that the software was even installed beyond the
Hmm.
CISO like checking on it to make sure that it was installed, right?
Yeah.
So it's fully automated. So that's great because it's a proper use case of there weren't even any security people there that even knew it was installed except for the CISO who had
Yep.
a emergency snap decision install right now.
Hmm.
Um, we have other times where we do efficacy testing. We'll actually be brought in by customers and then like just go ahead and test their current security stack.
Hmm.
They'll test our efficacy. We're never concerned about that. But then they'll actually test their MDR and they'll
Okay.
say, hey, can you go ahead and run your capabilities you have in the captured malware and stuff against our SOC and without them knowing and see if they can actually respond.
Hmm.
And it really highlights just how awful the human-driven operation is right now. Where they're measuring how many hours it would take to call us. The
Yep.
ransomware can knock out a business in 90 seconds, right? So that's there's just too wide of a gap there.
And it's
Hours
always
and
fun.
days.
It's always fun.
Yeah,
It's always fun calculating like the dollars per hour that they lose. Like
Right.
Some people I work with, like they work with mining companies. It's like it's literally millions of dollars an hour
It
that
is,
people
yeah.
lose if they go down. And it's like, well, it's like this whole chain from mine to the ocean and to ship. It's like one thing's wrong, ugh, terrible. Um,
Right.
and I guess like shifting directions slightly, when it comes to running like Cyber Crucible, what do you guys found to be the most effective way to grow? Because you guys have been in business for quite a while, and there's maybe some founders who might be listening to this who are just getting started in the cybersecurity world. Like, what has worked really well in order to grow the business as far as getting new people in the door, and then maybe what hasn't worked so well?
Yeah, so we actually incorporated it in 2014 now, I think, right? So of course in 20 end of 2019 is when we pivoted over to this commercial product. Um I'm not quite there in my life yet, but I always joke that doing inventions for like special forces or DoD is a bit like watching your kid go to college over and over and over because you get to a certain point where there's like, okay, great, the Green Berets are using it, and then they're
Yeah,
like, great. And then the military is like, okay, yeah, good job. Here's a new problem we need to figure out.
yeah,
And so you don't get to actually see the success of your product, right?
hmm,
Unless it breaks, and you got to go and undo whatever Booz Allen did or whatever consulting company did. And
yeah,
um, so basically the company formed in 2020 onward. I can tell you that as we moved towards, we already did highly automated operational kind of capabilities. In For DoD and intelligence community customers,
hmm,
doing that in the commercial world. Uh, the thing on the outreach that I found is that as we went through the prototyping and a couple product refinements, not really pivots, but just refinements of the customer experience,
hmm,
and grew our capability and our stability and our ability to execute on larger customers.
hmm,
We're at a point now where I realized that as of last year, I essentially had a complex sale relationship driven sales team that
yep,
was, very appropriate for a large enterprise tool with 900 knobs to turn and a 6 month POC process.
yeah,
That's very normal. That's how business is done. Um, and to the point probably where, it drives some of the behaviors with cybersecurity leaders, right? Where there's kind of like, oh, I don't want to talk to any more vendors, because there's always some catch, right?
yeah,
We ended up moving, and we've been executing on a change this past year towards a more of a SaaS product,
okay,
um, angle that just so happens to be a cybersecurity product, right?
hmm,
And because essentially what I found is that I had a product which was automated on the onboarding, automated on the sales experience, demos ready to go, whatever. They can demo it themselves, very low friction on the sales cycle. But
hmm,
then, so essentially a water pipe that's like 4 feet wide, but then a complex sale operation that requires a lot of relationships is more like
yeah,
a garden hose, right?
yeah,
I've been pivoting the sales structure to be more like, honestly, more like how antivirus and security tools were like in the 90s,
okay,
where you could go to like, I mean, CompUSA shut down, Circuit City, I don't know if that's still around even anymore, but like basically you could go there and buy it off the shelf, literally, and then
hmm,
just go and install it, and it kind of worked, and you were like, great, I have no idea what this is, but that's my brand now. I'm loyal to my brand, and you have no
uh-huh,
idea why. You're just like, I
okay,
love the
yeah,
yellow
yeah, yeah.
of Norton or whatever, right? And so we're returning to that kind of model, right?
Okay,
And that's worked very well for us, and that's
hmm,
gotten our revenues past what would be considered Series A revenues,
okay,
without having to have the 4 rounds of VCs and things like that normally folks have at this point.
hmm. For sure, for sure. Okay, so moving over to that SaaS model was very good. And what are some of the challenges that you're facing going into this? Well, I mean, you've been in it, but like going into this new direction where you're like, okay, if we unlock this bottleneck, then boom, we're gonna be to the next level within the business.
Yeah, on one thing we've seen, so first of all, is that the paid media,
Hmm.
in terms of like Google Ads,
Yeah,
I tried that game and I got into like a bidding war with like, CrowdStrike or something, and that's just a
yeah.
losing proposition because they're just
Sixty
gonna
dollar
dump money
cost per
on it.
click, something like that.
Yeah, and then next came the bots that were like, because I was like, okay, I'll make my ad go at like 9 a.m.,
Yeah.
and I'll focus on this area. And then at like 9 a.m., like these like bots would appear, and by 9:05, whatever my budget was gone, like stuff like that. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this has to be an organic, education-based sales operation.
Hmm.
So we've been creating content
Hmm.
We had a new website go up, and then that turned out to be not a good provider. And I'm like, okay, it's time to switch providers. And so the one pager was not the strategy, but
Yeah.
we're fixing that now in the background.
Hmm.
And the idea is to do a lot of education and a lot of material media that
Okay.
can do a lot of outreach in an educational standpoint.
Hmm.
If I find a salesperson that is not providing value to the customer
Yeah.
on their outreach in some way, right?
Yep.
Then normally I'm like, okay, look, you either got to change or you got to go. Like we can't just blast people. There's just too much. There's too much
Yeah.
out there. So really the challenge is, okay, well, there's a lot of noise and
Hmm.
cybersecurity is not regulated, so you can say whatever you want in a way that if it was MRI machines, we'd have
Uh,
dead kids everywhere, quite honestly. Like it's horrible, right?
yeah.
It's a lot of being educational based and providing truth to power in
Okay.
terms of, okay, we can back up what we're saying, and here's the facts, and
Mm.
that's proved to be very, very useful.
Hmm.
And doing organic engagement, it really seems to be the best way.
Okay. Very nice. Awesome. Well, Dennis, thank you very much for your time here. Very much appreciate it. I hope this is valuable to anybody who might be listening. And yeah, thank you very much, Dennis. Where can people check out your website if they're wanting to check out Cyber Crucible?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to my LinkedIn. I'm very active, easy to find me.
Very good.
I think it's me and a water authority guy, so it's pretty easy to know who I am. And then
There
you
you
can go
go.
to our website, cybercrucible.com.
Very good. Awesome. Yeah, I think I have me and then like some musician or something, which that guy might be cooler. I don't know. All right. Appreciate it. Thanks,
Nice,
Dennis.
nice.